To what lengths would you go to find a treatment for your child? Would you go to another town, another state, another country? Would you only do what your insurance will pay for? Or would you be willing to go outside the box and spend thousands of dollars out of your own pocket? Would you change doctors? And if so, how many times? Because it's not easy. Would you be willing to break the law? 11 years ago, I would have answered these questions very differently than I do today. My daughter, Christina, was born in 2004 during a hurricane, fitting in that she would spend the next 11 years of her life in a whirlwind of medical experimentation to try to calm the electrical storm in her brain. Shortly after she was born, she went into respiratory distress and they put her in the NICU, and it was the first time we ever had seen a child hooked to so many machines and tubes. 3 months later, the seizures began, and she was put on her first anti-epileptic drug, phenobarbital. We were told, doesn't cause any harm. Lots of kids use this, been around forever, so we never looked at the side effects. See, at this point, you're just numb, and you blindly follow the doctor's orders. And at 5 months, when she was still seizing, they added drug 2, and then 3, and then 4. And then when she was 6 months old, she was on all of them at the same time. I looked them up, and I found out 2 of the drugs were FDA approved for children 12 and over. But when I asked about this, I said, oh, those FDA's guidelines, they're just guidelines. They don't really mean anything. So I had to convince the doctor to drop 2 drugs, and he let me pick which 2. And I need you to know, I'm not a nurse and I'm not a doctor. So my daughter had a brief reprieve, and the seizure stopped, and for 7 months she learned to babble and crawl, or roll over and laugh and give big open mouth kisses. But then when she was 11 months old, the seizures returned. She sat in her high chair and she began to nod over and over and over again. And it was the worst diagnosis we could hope for, called infantile spasms. And she had to have injections in her legs twice a day, steroids, that made her face blow up like this. Her little brother was actually 5 years older than her, but her face grew to be the same size as his. Development halted, babbling stopped, and to this day she does not speak. On her first birthday, they just told me to take her home and love her, because there was nothing we could do. And this began our journey to neurology clinics, and we went to number 2. And they suggested the ketogenic diet. We put her on the ketogenic diet, and it was amazing. She went from 80 to 100 seizures a day to 10. She learned to pull up, crawl, and walk in 6 weeks. We were ecstatic. But this doctor didn't like all the drugs, so he dropped drug number 4, and he added drug number 6 because he said that's what you do. And as the dose got higher, her progress waned, and her seizures turned to grand mals. So we were on seizure type number 3. They added emergency drug number 7, and she was just turning 2. So we sold the play kitchen and the Barbie car, and her childhood was spent going from clinic to clinic, repeating test after test, because each doctor felt that they knew more than the one before. And we all started out convinced that they had the answer. But their interest quickly faded, and they used big words like cryptogenic and idiopathic and generalized. And when you look them up, they mean, I don't know, and I don't know, and it's everywhere. So 5 different seizure types manifested into 100 seizures a week, and she spent most of her days like this. And we were told by every doctor that the only thing we could do was the one thing that they were doing at that time. But my little angel's a fighter. So she would rally and look like this, and it would be almost as if she was trying to tell us, don't give up on me. There is hope. And all of these rallies were accompanied by lowering medicine and changing her diet. This phenomenon occurred over and over during her lifetime. And could this be the key? I often wonder. So we became medical tourists, and her 5th birthday was spent in China, or in Germany, and her 6th in China, and we did stem cells. And the results were amazing, but short-lived, because we couldn't repeat the tests. They're not allowed in our country. The cost was too great to continue to travel. So the seizures returned, new doctors were visited, and more seizures, more meds. So one of them even said, let's do a drug that's not FDA approved, And he gave me a prescription and told me to mail it to another country, and drugs showed up on my doorstep. And then we went to doctor number 6, who said, let's do surgery. And for the next 12 months, we did a series of 3 brain surgeries. And each one, they took more of her brain in an attempt to eradicate the seizures. And she surprised us, and she walked out of the hospital after the first 2 surgeries with no loss of skills. But the third one was a total failure. The seizures had spread to new places, and I was heartbroken. Because my daughter had to relearn to walk and eat again for the 3rd time in 1 year, but now she only had half her brain. Oh. But again, she's very determined. And 7 months later, she walked into the doctor's office holding my hand from the parking lot all the way up to the office. She was absolutely glowing. But the pesky seizures were still there, so drug number 16 was tried. She was 9. And she went downhill fast. And she lost the ability to swallow, chew, walk, poop, and even pee. And she laid like this, which we now call the praying mantis. A dear friend of mine nicknamed this praying mantis position. We had to have a feeding tube inserted and hips put in or pins in her hips to hold her bones in place. And as I sat in the doctor's office in tears, reviewing everything that we've done in the first 9 years of her life, 16 different drugs, 1,000 side effects, and all of these things. And he looked at me and he said, do you believe in God? Because I think that's all you have left. And this sounds really barbaric, and I'm even horrified when I look at this list of things. We did everything that medical science had suggested, and we trusted that. And it was all they were capable of with the tools and the knowledge that they had. But is that really okay? And is that what we really settle for? So this was the last picture, and this is where we'd ended up. And I posted this on her page, and I had said, I really thought this was her last post. It was a despair post, and all of a sudden my kids were watching a TV about weed in California, and they're like, Mom, you've got to see this. This little boy's being treated with medical marijuana and the seizures are stopping. And then everybody started to send me links to some little girl in Colorado. And the more things I looked at, I couldn't believe these kids were taking medical marijuana and they weren't smoking it, and their seizures were stopping, and they were not just stopping, they were progressing, regaining skills that they had lost. So I asked my doctors. They all said, never heard of it. In fact, what they said was, there's no evidence, no scientific evidence that that works, and there's no double-blind studies, therefore it is not a valid treatment. And what I said was, there was no double-blind studies when you gave her 2, 3, 4, 5 medicines as a baby, and all the other children that they're doing this to. But this seems to be standard practice in our medical community today. So I found somebody with a medical card in a legal state, and I got a sample, and I gave it to her secretly. I didn't want anybody to know. I'd become the wacky lady with all these things I had tried, and so I didn't want people to know. And after 5 days, she stopped seizing. In 20 days, she sat up. And then 30 days, she started eating again. In 180 days, she had a 90% reduction in seizures and had regained all of her bodily functions again. But I ran out. And so I thought pot was pot. Must be everywhere. That's what everyone says. It's on every street corner. So I went looking. And I found myself meeting strangers in parking lots to acquire medicine. And I'm in an illegal state. So I thought this was crazy. I'm a businesswoman. I'm a mom. And this is crazy. And sadly, it's happening all over America today. And I was too afraid to give it to her when I got it, so I went online and I found a test kit. So I actually could test whether it was THC, CBD, which I knew from my little trial that I needed CBD and some THC, but I didn't need recreational THC. I needed a combination of things. And so I couldn't find any CBD. There was no CBD in anything I tested. I became obsessed with find something with CBD in it. My kids nicknamed me the chemist. My kitchen was used to test weed samples, and I no longer baked cookies. And And I'm sure they're laughing too, but so anyway, I went on Facebook and I researched and I joined groups and I found out that there were success stories all over the world coming in. Not just for seizures, not just for CBD, but on the whole plant and on over 40 illnesses listed. I know you can't read that, but it's over 40 illnesses are listed on that chart. And it's all of the plant and all of the compounds. How could I miss this? And I don't know, why did no one tell me? 5 states had passed medical marijuana laws. And so I thought, well, I'll just call somebody and have them mail it to me. Because remember, drugs were mailed to me from another country. That was okay. So I called and they go, oh, no, we can't do that. It's federally illegal for us to mail that to you, and you have to be a resident of this state to get it. I thought that was crazy. So Colorado had gone recreational at the time. I thought I'll just fly there because pot is pot. Maybe their pot's different than ours, and I could go get it myself. So I flew to Colorado. I went to 3 cities, 8 dispensaries, asking for this CBD stuff, and no one had any. And they said, boy, there's a lot of parents coming in asking for that. And I went home empty-handed, except for a 12-day sample someone gave me, and she was seizure-free 8 of the 12 days. I had no more. Would I now have to move my family and become a medical refugee like everyone I was reading about? So my state was gearing up for a vote, and I started to speak around the state with some moms, and we became known as the Canna Moms. And we spoke a lot, and someone heard us talk, and an organization sponsored us to take our children to a legal state, see a doctor, get a recommendation, and have safe tested oils, all donated by these people. And so we went, and the first 2 oils didn't really work very much, but the second one, 10 days, and then 30 and 60, and she went 101 days without a visible seizure. All of her bodily functions, she was eating 3 meals a day. I just wanted to shout from the rooftops. It was so exciting, and our vote didn't pass. So at this point, I went to the sheriff, and I told him. I did news interviews. I came out of the closet because I thought if I was honest and I told everybody, they would all listen and change the world for me. And I went to the subcommittee meetings and I testified in front of the Senate and I showed them her pictures. The most time they gave me was 30 seconds. Everything stalled, nothing passed, and I found myself totally exposed that I had broken the law and was continuing to do so. So I have an arrest plan on my refrigerator so my children know who to call if something happens to mom, because this is happening all over our country. We don't have the soccer schedule, we have the arrest plan. And I would rather be judged by 12 jurors than have my daughter carried by 6 pallbearers. So I'm not a conventional mom. I don't go to coffee club, and I don't join the book club. So I follow national organizations like this, and I began work with Divergent Medical Enterprises, which is a consulting firm, and my daughter is a member of the National Cannabis Patients Wall with 18,000 other faces of need. I collaborate daily with parents from the UK, Denmark, Australia, and states all over this country, and we all struggle daily because we have no regulation, no testing, no structure, and access and control is a constant challenge. I don't understand why the government isn't rushing to change things for us. Do they not read and see what we are seeing? And the more I learned, the more frustrated, angry, and even disgusted I started to become, and so should you. The history of cannabis in our country dates back to the 1800s. And in the early 1900s, it was the most prescribed medicine, and it was produced by companies like Eli Lilly and Parker Davis. In 1937, the AMA came out with a statement that says they don't see any harm in cannabis. The same year, the government passed prohibition. In 1970, the Controlled Substances Act said it's the most dangerous drug. But in 1976, the government created the Investigational New Drug Research Compassionate Research Project and gave patients 9 pounds of cannabis a year, government grown. And then in 1988, the DEA said it's safe and it would be arbitrary and capricious for the DEA to stand in the way. But in 1989, so many people applied for the research program, they shut it down because they didn't want to do it. And then in 2004, the US government, there's a patent that was taken out. This sounds exciting. To treat use of cannabis to treat neurodegenerative diseases, which my daughter has. And the patent owner is the government, and they've sat on it ever since, and that's the year she was born. And in September 2nd, just last month, our new DEA chief said If we could come up with a medical use, that would be great, but we have not. What is it? I mean, come on, this is like, I get dizzy every time I read the slides. So what happened to the research project? It must have been a failure, right? Because you never heard about it? Wrong. Meet Irv. Irv still gets marijuana cigarettes. He's a stockbroker. They come in the mail every month for 33 years, paid for by your tax dollars and grown by the government. There's 4 patients left alive today that still get their cannabis. So in 1 year, we saw this, from pharmaceuticals to this on cannabis. Maybe Mr. DEA needs to meet Christina, because this is a double standard and it's outright hypocrisy. I can go to another state or another country and I'm a medical tourist, but if I go to another state, I'm a drug trafficker. We could be sitting on one of the greatest discoveries of our lifetime, and the doctors and the researchers' hands are tied because of our antiquated laws, and they cannot have access to research and study. Politicians have become pseudo-physicians and medical experts, deciding with the stroke of a pen which illness gets treated and which one doesn't, determining which illness is worthy and who goes to treatment and who goes to jail based on the state you live in. So this chart was recently put out, and everything in orange says you can have one part of the plant and you can have one illness, maybe 2. My state says 4, but everything in purple, wow, you're lucky. You get to use the whole plant, and you get between 5 and 37 illnesses. And if you're in white, you're going to jail. So basically, are we the United States or the divided states? There's nothing at all. This is all one big contradiction. So I want to tell you how Christina is today. So let's get back onto her. So 22 months on cannabis, Christina is doing fantastic. So her eyes are bright. This was taken yesterday on the way home from school. Her little personality's coming through. She's eating 3 meals a day, feeding herself. She has to have help getting it on the fork, but she's on a tightly controlled diet with integrative therapies. And she gives me open mouth kisses again. And last week, she took 6 steps, the first time in 2 years. So today is 48 days since we've seen a seizure. And this is real, folks. We need you to spread the word. This is an evolution, and I want you to join it. And if you don't have a story of your own, use mine. Because I would have loved for you to have met her, but Christina cannot travel because of conflicting laws with the very medicine that has allowed her to have her life back. One day, it could be the person sitting next to you in the audience, or yourself, or your child that would need access to medical cannabis. And no one should have to choose between legally suffering and illegally healing. Thank you.